What we're going to do is we're going to talk about decimals. Last week, those of you who are watching, we talked about multiplying decimals. We talked about adding decimals, and we talked about subtracting decimals. Now today what I want to do is I want to talk about dividing decimals. It's a common area where unfortunately some students have issues, so we're going to talk about that, and let's just proceed until you call in. Let's take a look. What I have is I have a problem, 3.14 divided by 2. 3.14 divided by 2. So before we begin, I want to talk about some common terms. This is called a divisor. The second number is called a divisor. This number here is called a dividend. All right. And as we divide, I want to go through some steps. The steps that I want to go through, you can't see these. You can't see this, I don't think. But what it says is I'm going to divide first, then I'm going to multiply, then I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to bring down, and I'm going to start the process all over again. I'm going to do the same thing for each of these problems. Once again, I'm going to divide, I'm going to multiply, I'm going to subtract, I'm going to bring down, then I'm going to start over. Okay, so for each of these division problems, I'm going to do basically 4 things. I'm going to divide, then I'm going to multiply, then I'm going to subtract, then I'm going to bring down. For every single problem, I'll go through the same steps. And hopefully you can observe that as we do a number of problems. All right, let's take a look. So we've got, let's write our divisor first. So we have 2 divided by 3.14. 2 divided by 3.14. All right. So what I maybe should have mentioned is before we do the division, multiplication, subtraction, and then bringing down, before we do all that, I'm going to ask that we bring the decimal straight up. All right. So maybe I should have said all of that. Maybe I should have said that before I mentioned the 4 steps. So let's bring the decimal straight up first. All right, let's take a look at that problem one more time. All right, so we have the divisors are 2. I'll always ask you to make that divisor a whole number. And then, as I said before, we're going to make sure we bring that decimal straight up. All right, so we did that, making sure that that divisor is a whole number. So you ask yourself, this is the division part. We're going to divide. How many times does 2 go into 3? You'll notice it goes in 1 time. And now, the second step, we multiply. 1 times 2 is 2. All right, so we divide it, then we multiplied. The next step is to subtract. Let's subtract these 2 numbers. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then we divide it, we multiply it, we subtract it. Now let's bring down. Let's bring down the 1. Bring that 1 straight down. And you only bring down 1 number as well. We only bring down 1 number. And now we start all over again. Let's divide again. How many times does 2 go into 11? You'll see it goes in 5 times. We put the 5 there. Now let's multiply. 5 times 2 is 10. All right. And then let's subtract. We subtract 10 from 11. We get 1. And we bring down. We're going through the same steps over and over again. We bring down to 4. And then we divide again. How many times does 2 go into 14? 7. All right. And then we multiply. 7 times 2 is 14. Subtract, and you get 0. The final answer, 1.57. 1.57. You know, this is a, if you got a circle with a radius of 1, you'd have to take pi times r squared. You know, it would be 3.14. And if it was a half circle, you'd have to divide by 2. I guess I'm trying to give you an example of where you'd have to do this kind of math. You'd have the area of a circle, but if it's a half circle, you'd have to divide by 2 to get 1.57. So that's our first problem, where we have to divide 2 decimals. If you have a question on anything that I've done, I want you to call in. Don't be afraid. But if you don't, I'm just going to keep going because I have a lot of problems I want to get to. All right, let's take a look at another one. Okay, so we have 3.14 divided by 2.9. Let's bring this down just a little bit. 3.14 divided by 2.9. Okay, that second number is a divisor, is going outside the division sign. Now hopefully you see that the difference between this problem and this problem is not so much the dividend but the divisor. All right, so when this 2, I just made it the whole number 2, but here you really are going to have to move this decimal in order to make that a whole number. One of the things I mentioned to you in the previous problem is make sure that this divisor is a whole number. And if it's not, what you're going to have to do is just move that decimal over 1, making that a whole number. Now, whatever you do to the divisor, you got to do this dividend. Move the decimal place over 1, and as I said before, the first step is to bring the decimal straight up. Bring that decimal straight up. It's very important where you put that decimal point. The decimal point is in between the 1 and the 4, not before the 1. All right, so now that you brought the decimal straight up, we're going to go through these steps one more time. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down, and start over. All right, so now let's divide. This is no longer 2.9, it's now 29. Divide. How many times does 29 go into 3? How many times does 29 go into 3? I want you to be able to see that 29 cannot go into 3. So you're going to put a 0 there, or you don't have to put anything there at all. It's very important that you don't just put a number anywhere. I'm strategically putting the number based on what 29 can go into. 29 can't go into the number 3, so I'm not going to put anything over the 3. However, 29 can go into 31. 29 can go into 31. So I'm going to put a 1 over the 1 in the 31, not over the 3. What I'm doing is I'm taking my time here because I'm sharing with you the place where the number 1 mistakes are made. Students don't know where to put these numbers. They think you can just put them anywhere, and that's not correct. Let's take a look at it one more time. Again, 29 cannot go into 3, so no number should be above the 3. 29 can go into 31, you put the 1 there. So that's the division. Now we're going to multiply, going through the 4 steps. Multiply 1 times 29, you get 29. You subtract, you get 2. All right, so I multiplied, I subtracted. Now I'm going to bring down. I'm going to bring down the next number, which is 4. 29 cannot go into 24. I brought down the number. Now I'm going to start over. I'm going to divide. 29 cannot go into 24, so I'll put a 0 there. The common mistake is students sometimes continue to bring down number after number until 29 can go into that number, and that's not correct. We're only bringing down one term. All right, so final answer. Oh, let's just take it a step further. 0 times 29, you get 0. All right, so that's division. Or excuse me, that's multiplication. Now let's subtract. You get 24. After you subtract, you bring down a number. Let's bring down 0. And then you ask yourself, how many times does 29 go into 240? And I think that's 8. All right, so let's just stay with that as a final answer. 1.08. Final answer.